She was kneeling on the cold marble floor of my penthouse, her trembling hands stretched toward me, makeup smeared by tears, her broken voice begging for a chance that no longer existed. In front of her, I stood still and silent, impeccable designer suit, cold expression, the same man she had once traded away as if I were disposable. Every word of forgiveness that came from her mouth only confirmed how everything was far too late. I looked at her without anger, without hatred, only with disdain. Because when someone abandons you at your peak, they cannot want to find you again at the top asking for shelter. Now tell me, how does a woman who had a young millionaire husband, an empire in her hands, and a life of absolute luxury end up like this, kneeling, humiliated, with nothing left? Do you want to know what really happened? Then you need to go back with me to the beginning of this story. To the day I met her, when I still believed in love above money, and she was already dreaming of everything money could buy. Stay with me until the end, because this story will show how ambition blinds, how betrayal destroys, and how destiny collects every choice at the perfect time. Subscribe to the channel now to keep following stories where luxury seduces, the fall is brutal, and the turnaround is unforgettable. I was only 25 when my name began circulating in the same halls where only 50-year-old men had once entered. While many were still searching for stability, I was already signing multimillion-dollar contracts, closing deals at glass tables overlooking skyscrapers, and falling asleep knowing my net worth was growing as I breathed. My company was generating massive revenue, my investments were multiplying, and my daily routine was a sequence of numbers, meetings, and decisions that changed destinies. Luxury did not arrive as a dream, it came as a consequence. I was not seeking extravagance, but it followed me. Wherever I went, value arrived before I did. And even so, I was still just a boy who believed that success and love could walk side by side. At that time, I still thought that everything shining around me was the reflection of something real inside my home. Little did I know that brightness can blind. And what seemed solid was hiding cracks as thin as strands of hair. Cracks I could not yet see because I was too high up to look down. In the garage of my mansion, the cars slept like steel beasts lined up in silence. Each imported model represented a goal achieved, a contract signed, a risk that paid off. The mansion was not just a house, it was the trophy of years of sleepless nights, cold coffee, and solitary decisions. I walked those marble corridors as one walks through a miniature empire. The pool reflected the sky like a clear mirror of everything I had conquered. From the helicopter to the watch on my wrist, everything spoke of wealth, power, and speed. And still, in the midst of so much luxury, I carried a simple thought. I wanted to share it all with someone who could see beyond the money. I believed that my greatest investment was not companies but people. I still believed in love stories built at the top of the world. It was that belief that made me vulnerable. Vulnerable enough to trust where I should have observed. My days began early, between meetings in mirrored buildings and trips scheduled on executive jets. One day in Sao Paulo, another in New York, another in Dubai, and always someone ready to receive me with carpets, figures, and promises. On my body, tailored designer suits. On my wrist, a watch worth the salary of many families. In my pocket, cards that opened doors anywhere on the planet. I learned to negotiate in different languages, to smile at faces hiding knives, and to predict moves before they happened. I was young, but life pushed me into accelerated maturity. I no longer saw money as luxury, I saw it as a tool. Everything spun too fast, always upward. And when I looked around, I was certain the world was at my feet. I just never imagined that someone would step on my back to climb with me. Because at the top, those who applaud are not always those who root for you. The parties I attended had no common ground. They were private clubs, yachts, rooftops lit by artificial stars, and people who never asked the price. Champagne flowed like water, laughter echoed among jewels, and businessmen toasted mergers with calculated smiles. That was where deals were born, alliances were sealed, and reputations were raised or buried in a single night. I moved through that environment naturally, like someone born inside an open vault. Some saw me as a prodigy, others as a silent threat. But everyone treated me with respect. The kind of respect that money buys too quickly. I watched everything with attentive eyes, as someone who knows that every stage of luxury hides dangerous games. Even so, something inside me sought a different kind of glow. A glow that was not made of diamonds, but of presence. I still believed I could choose someone outside that game. It was in that environment that everything began to change without me realizing it. My life seemed perfectly organized in growth charts, but there was an empty space no bank balance could fill. I had everything, except someone to share the silence after the parties and the wait after the victories. Success is loud on the outside, but very lonely on the inside. I felt that when the mansion doors closed and the echo of my footsteps was the only reply. International trips were dazzling, but hotel rooms always carried the same scent of perfumed loneliness. I wondered when money stopped being enough to feed the nights. Maybe it never was. But I insisted on believing that somewhere there was someone capable of seeing the man behind the businessman. Someone who would not see only what I had but who I was. That thought followed me like an unfulfilled promise. And unfulfilled promises have the power to push us toward dangerous choices. Choices that seem small at first but change entire destinies. Even surrounded by advisors, partners, and flatterers, I had an almost naive trust in people. I believed in words and looks and handshakes. Perhaps because I still carried traces of who I was before the first million. I never imagined that someone could come close to me just to consume, drain, or use me. I thought money amplified the best in people. Today I know it only reveals. It reveals hidden ambitions, masked interests, and desires that sleep until luxury awakens them. At that time I still poorly separated business and feelings. I thought I could control everything with logic, contracts, and numbers. But there are games that are not played with a calculator. Choices that do not fit in spreadsheets. And I was about to learn that in the most expensive way possible. I just did not yet know when nor with whom, nor the size of the price. I was seen as the golden boy of the market, the kid who won too early. Business magazines printed my face, interviews ran on television, and investors competed for space at my side. I smiled at the cameras as someone who understood that image is also an asset. Behind that trained smile, there was a young man who still believed in simple happy endings. I could buy islands, but I only wanted someone to walk with me on the same ground. I could cross oceans, but I wanted to share a breakfast table without bodyguards nearby. I believed that, despite the money, I was still just a man in search of love. That belief made me lower my guard. And when a powerful man lowers his guard, he becomes invisibly fragile. It was through that fragility that someone entered without asking permission. Entered smiling, praising, enchanting. And I allowed it. During that period I felt that my life was about to gain a new chapter. Not in numbers, not in contracts, not in investments, but in the heart. I did not yet know who this person would be, but I felt she was close. There was a silent expectation inside me, like an invisible countdown. I kept fulfilling schedules, signing papers, traveling between continents, but something was already moving behind the scenes of my own story. Something that did not appear in financial reports, but would change all my future projections. I still walked distracted through the corridor of success, unaware that someone was watching me from the other side. Someone who did not see only my eyes, but everything I owned behind them. And when two worlds move closer for different reasons, the impact is never light. I was about to step into a scene that had not been written by me. And yet, I would step into it of my own free will. That specific week, I received an invitation that seemed like just another among so many. A high-end event, influential businessmen, international investors, and well-known figures of high society. Nothing outside my routine. I accepted almost automatically, as I always did. I chose a new suit, tailored, discreet, and expensive. The watch, a rare model, reflected light on my wrist as if it were marking a time I had not yet known. I got into the black car with tinted windows and headed for another night of negotiations, toasts, and empty greetings. I still thought it would be just another luxury event. I still did not know that that night I would meet someone who would completely change the course of my life. Someone who seemed part of the scenery, but who was about to become the center of my downfall and my rise. And that was how, without fanfare, my destiny began to be redrawn. The hall where that event took place looked like it had come straight out of a movie. Giant chandeliers cast golden light over glass tables, designer suits crossed the space like perfectly cut shadows, and the expensive perfume of the guests mixed with the scent of champagne and ambition. I walked among investors and executives as someone moving across a human chessboard. It was just another ordinary night in my world. Business cards exchanged, calculated smiles, promises whispered softly. Until, in the middle of so many predictable faces, I saw her. It was not a sudden impact, it was as if the environment around me had lost its sharpness. She was standing near the bar, dressed with an elegance that did not scream but commanded. There was something in her eyes that did not match the superficiality of that place. I did not know it yet, but at that moment my focus shifted completely away from business. She smiled as she talked to a friend, holding a glass of wine as someone who had belonged to that scene her whole life. The dress highlighted her beauty without excess, her hair fell naturally, and her posture revealed confidence. She was not just beautiful, she was magnetic. I, who had already seen everything in that universe of luxury and appearance, felt something different stir inside me. A kind of curiosity that never arose in meetings or negotiations. I tried to resist for a few minutes, as I always did with anything that was not in my plans. But the truth is that, for the first time in a long while, I was not looking at numbers. I was looking at a person. And that unsettled me more than any multimillion-dollar contract ever had. When our eyes met, there was no shyness. There was intensity. The kind that hangs in the air for a few seconds before someone dares to move. I approached her cautiously, like someone stepping into unknown territory. My voice came out steady, but there was something new behind it, something almost youthful. We talked about simple things in the middle of a place where everything was exaggerated. We laughed at silly comments while, around us, multimillion-dollar deals continued to be closed. I felt strange for enjoying that. Strange for realizing that I did not want to talk about companies, stocks, or expansion. I wanted to understand who she was beyond that dress and that party. And she seemed to like that interest that escaped the obvious. There was a silent game happening there. A game in which neither of us yet knew the real rules. She told me that she was used to that social circle, that she frequented high-end events, Michelin-star restaurants, rooftops, and international trips. She spoke naturally about luxury like someone who had been breathing that air since early on. Her eyes shone when she mentioned expensive places, exclusive experiences, famous brands. I listened carefully, but my mind tried to separate charm from warning. I had encountered many women who approached me with clear interest. But in her there were subtleties that confused me. She asked for nothing, hinted at nothing, she simply seemed enchanted by me. Or by what I represented, I did not yet know. In that moment, I chose to believe in the beautiful side of the story. I chose to believe that, this time it was different. And choices made with the heart tend to demand the highest price later. We talked for almost an hour, forgetting the noise around us. Her world seemed perfectly connected to mine. She understood the universe, knew how to behave, how to speak, how to react. It was as if she had already been shaped to walk beside someone like me. That apparent fit hypnotized me. When I suggested we continue the conversation in a quieter place, she accepted without hesitation. We went to a sophisticated restaurant nearby, one of those where reservations are made weeks in advance. The waiter addressed us by last name, as they always do with me. I watched how she reacted to that. Her eyes shone a little brighter. A quick glow, almost imperceptible. But I saw it. I always saw it. I just did not give it the weight I should have. At the well-lit table, among expensive dishes and glasses that were never empty, she began to open up more. She spoke of dreams, of freedom, of wanting to live intensely. I spoke of projects, of goals, of building solid things. Our visions touched, but they were not the same. While I thought in long-term growth, she seemed fascinated by the intensity of the present moment. That intrigued me and, at the same time, attracted me. I had always been too rational. Perhaps that is why her emotion pulled me off balance. I found myself smiling more often than I should. And that, for someone used to controlling everything, was a dangerous sign of involvement. That night, when we said goodbye, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Anticipation. A kind of pleasant anxiety, almost adolescent. In the days that followed, we exchanged messages, scheduled new meetings, repeated dinners, short trips, outings to exclusive places. She fit perfectly into the life I led. Or at least it seemed so. My friends praised her, said that I had finally found someone at my level. Someone beautiful, elegant, intelligent, from the same world. I liked hearing that. I confess it fed my ego. Seeing that woman by my side validated, to the outside world, everything I had achieved. I still did not realize that, while I was bringing her into my world, she was already analyzing how far that world could take her. That night, when we said goodbye, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Anticipation. A kind of pleasant anxiety, almost adolescent. In the days that followed, we exchanged messages, scheduled new meetings, repeated dinners, short trips, outings to exclusive places. She fit perfectly into the life I led. Or at least it seemed so. My friends praised her, said that I had finally found someone at my level. Someone beautiful, elegant, intelligent, from the same world. I liked hearing that. I confess it fed my ego. Seeing that woman by my side validated, to the outside world, everything I had achieved. I still did not realize that, while I was bringing her into my world, she was already analyzing how far that world could take her. She admired my cars, praised my mansion, was enchanted by the trips I made for work. Everything seemed genuine to my eyes. I felt good providing that to her. Offering comfort, experiences, access to a restricted universe. I saw joy on her face when she boarded a private jet, when she stayed in 5-star hotels, when she walked with me among important people. I interpreted that glow as love, as admiration. Today I know that love and fascination with luxury do not carry the same weight. But at that time I still mixed everything into the same word. I was far too involved to notice the subtle differences between feeling and interest. Over time our meetings became routine. I no longer made plans without thinking of her. My schedule began to revolve around our moments. Romantic dinners, quick trips, weekends at the mansion. She adapted to everything with a frightening ease. She never seemed out of place. On the contrary, she seemed born to live that life. That impressed me and reassured me at the same time. I believed I was facing someone who perfectly matched my destiny. Someone who would walk beside me as I climbed even higher. I still did not realize that, for her, the top held a different meaning. And that, many times, those who only want to reach the top do not care who will fall along the way. At that period, I was perhaps at the most vulnerable moment of my journey. Not out of weakness, but out of excess confidence. I believed I controlled everything. I believed I saw everything. I believed it was impossible for anyone to approach me without me noticing their intentions. And it was precisely within that belief that she entered. With lightness, with beauty, with charm. Without making noise. Without raising suspicion. Like someone who walks in through the front door as an invited guest. And while I surrendered to the feeling that was being born, another silent story began to be written in parallel. A story I still could not see, but one that was already breathing very close to me. A few months after that first meeting, I could no longer see myself without her. Decisions began to be made considering two names and not just mine. I thought I was building something solid, beautiful, and true. I felt finally ready to take a step I had never taken before. A step that would involve not only my heart, but the entire empire I had built until then. And it was at that point in my life, when I believed I was beginning something eternal, that I decided to make that romance official. Without knowing that, by doing so, I would be opening the door to the most dangerous part of my story. A part that would begin under applause, but would end under silence. The proposal was not planned like a business deal, but it happened with the same certainty as a major acquisition. I took her to one of the most exclusive places I knew, a luxury seaside resort reserved only for members of the global financial elite. The sky was clear, the sea was calm, and everything seemed to conspire to make that moment perfect. When I knelt down, I felt something no multimillion-dollar contract had ever made me feel. A chill in my chest, a mix of fear and hope. She covered her face with her hands, her eyes sparkled, and the yes came quickly, strong, emotional. In that instant, I believed I had made the greatest investment of my life. I saw no risk, no doubt. I saw a future. A future that, in my mind, would be as solid as my numbers. The wedding was planned like everything else in my life, on the maximum scale. We chose a 5-star resort closed exclusively to the guests. Businessmen, celebrities, politicians, high-end influencers, all gathered to witness our union. The setting looked like a luxury film. Imported flowers, cinematic lighting, international musicians, an altar built over the sea. The press wanted photos, social media exploded with comments even before the ceremony began. I walked toward the altar feeling the weight of my surname, but also the warmth of a dream being lived. When I saw her walk in wearing a white dress custom designed by an international fashion house, I did not see ambition, I saw only beauty. And once again I believed that the scene was real. The reception was a spectacle on its own. Crystal glasses, mirrored tables, dishes signed by renowned chefs, and champagne that cost more than many cars. Laughter, speeches, toasts, and promises filled the hall. Everyone said we were the perfect couple of the new generation of millionaires. Young, rich, beautiful, and successful. I felt proud to have her by my side. We walked hand in hand among guests who admired us. To the world, we were living proof that love and money could walk together. I believed that. And perhaps that belief was the veil that covered my eyes for the last time before the fall. The honeymoon was a succession of countries, private islands, and hotels that looked like floating palaces. One day we woke up in Paris, the next we were in Dubai, then in the Maldives. Romantic dinners with impossible views, yacht rides at sunset, shopping in stores where prices never appeared on the tags. Everything was excess. Everything was spectacle. I watched the glow in her eyes with every new experience. She was moved by the luxury, the exclusivity, the feeling of living a dream that few people in the world could live. I took pride in providing that. And I interpreted that glow as gratitude, as love. I still could not distinguish fascination from feeling. When we returned, she officially moved into the mansion with me. Her walk-in closet took up an entire floor filled with designer handbags, custom dresses, jewelry, and signature shoes. I found it amusing, almost romantic. I saw it all as part of marriage. I worked, traveled, closed deals. She decorated rooms, planned dinners, frequented high society spaces. My name continued to grow in the markets, and our name began to grow on society pages. This time, not only as a businessman but as a symbol couple of luxury and ascent. I liked seeing that. I felt that my life now had more color. What I did not realize was how artificial that color was becoming. Social media became a constant stage. She posted trips, events, gifts, exclusive restaurants. Our life looked like a non-stop commercial for wealth. Likes climbed, comments praised, people envied. I rarely appeared, as I had always kept my image discreet. But she loved the exposure. Loved the spotlight, the invitations, the cameras. I saw that as something natural in the world we lived in. Never as a warning sign. After all, I believed that those who had everything at home did not need to seek anything outside. I was wrong. Very wrong. Wedding gifts continued to arrive weeks after the ceremony. Luxury watches, works of art, letters from influential businessmen, invitations to restricted clubs. Our name opened doors that had already been rare before. I felt established not only as a businessman, but as a family man. I spoke of children, of generational wealth, of a structured future. She smiled, agreed, kissed my face. But her eyes, even full of sparkle, always seemed turned toward the next material conquest. The next event, the next trip, the next jewel. I still called that enthusiasm. I still called that living intensely. I did not call it emptiness. As the months passed, I realized that the marriage worked better in photos than in the silence of the early morning. Our conversations were light, almost always about external things. We rarely went into depth. I spoke of projects, she spoke of trends. I spoke of growth, she spoke of status. And even so, I convinced myself that it was a phase of adjustment. Marriages require adjustments, I thought. Love matures with time, I kept telling myself. What I did not understand was that you cannot mature what was never planted at the same depth. But I was not yet ready for that realization. There were moments when I returned from trips exhausted and found the house empty, even though she was at home. Sometimes she was at dinners, events, meetings with elite friends. I respected her space. I trusted her. I always trusted. My security team, my staff, everyone treated her like a queen. I made sure of that. After all, she was my wife. I believed that caring was synonymous with loving. And loving, for me, included offering absolute comfort. I still did not realize that for some people, comfort is never enough. There is always a next step. And that step does not always stay inside the house. One night, as I watched her getting ready for yet another exclusive event, something flashed quickly through my mind. A strange thought, almost like a subconscious warning. The glow in her eyes was not the same as when she looked at me. It was the glow of the mirror, of the lights, of imaginary cameras. I brushed that feeling aside the way one dismisses a bad omen. I kissed her forehead, wished her a good night, and returned to my office inside the mansion. While I reviewed numbers worth millions, she passed through doors I could not see. Doors I still believed were all under my control. And it was there, amid that silent contrast, that the seed of the next chapter began to germinate. After the wedding, something began to change in her almost imperceptibly. It was not an abrupt shift, it was like the tide rising without making a sound. Small details started to accumulate. Subtle comments about other women in the elite, disguised comparisons, desires that always appeared in the form of just one more thing. I saw it as natural vanity. After all, she was surrounded by luxury, by wealthy people, by unreal standards. Even so, there was something different in the tone. It was no longer admiration for what we had, but an almost constant dissatisfaction with what she still did not have. And I, believing that love is proven through giving, doubled my efforts to please her. She began to want new jewelry more often, not because the old ones were no longer enough, but because other women were showing off newer models. Trips that had once been special started to be treated as a mandatory routine. If one friend went to Monaco, she wanted to go to the Maldives. If another appeared in Paris, she wanted New York. It was a silent and endless competition. I watched it, trying to understand where such hunger for more came from. Inside the house, she had everything. But outside the house, she wanted to be everything. And those two things do not always walk together. The conversations began to change in tone. What used to be dialogue became comparison. She talked about a friend's husband who had bought a bigger yacht. She talked about the influencer who had received an apartment as a gift. She talked about the businessman who surprised his wife with a private jet. I listened in silence. My wealth was growing, my businesses were doing well, but suddenly nothing seemed enough to fill that invisible ruler she used to measure happiness. I worked more, closed bigger contracts, took higher risks. All to sustain not only a lifestyle, but an expectation that never ended. She also began to expose herself even more. Before she posted moments, now she seemed to live to post. Every look needed validation, every dinner needed to be displayed, every trip needed to generate envy. I started to notice that my own absence from those posts no longer bothered her. On the contrary, it was as if she now belonged more to the outside world than to our inner world. I came home late from the company and found the house in silence while she was at some luxury event. Always with an elegant justification, always with a ready smile. I continued to trust. But trust without observation becomes blindness. Money, which had once been a means, began to be the end for her. Everything revolved around deserving, around having, around showing. She talked less about us and more about herself. Less about the future and more about now. When I tried to bring up deeper conversations, she dodged them lightly, like someone avoiding an uncomfortable mirror. I sensed that something was shifting, but I still did not fully understand what. I thought she was simply going through a phase of adapting to a world of extreme luxury. I underestimated the power of desire when it finds no limits. Her friends began to change as well. Women increasingly focused on appearance, money, and influence. Dinners that did not include couples, trips that did not involve me, girls only, gatherings in places far too expensive for casual outings. I respected it, but something inside me began to grow uneasy. It was not jealousy. It was a strange, almost silent premonition that arose when I saw her excitement to go out and her indifference to stay in. I never invaded her space. I believed that control is not protection. I thought that freedom strengthens relationships. I just did not know that, in certain cases, freedom becomes escape. The way she looked at me also began to change. Before there had been admiration, affection, curiosity about my projects. Now there was haste, distraction, impatience. Many times, while I was saying something important about my business, she was on her phone, smiling at the screen. I asked what it was, she answered that it was friends. I accepted it. I always did. Because I believed that if someone wanted to deceive me, it would not be so obvious. I did not realize that the most dangerous changes are always the most subtle. There was one night when she came home late, with the smell of expensive drinks and a perfume different from the one she wore with me. I asked if she had had fun. She answered yes lightly and went to take a shower. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary for someone living that lifestyle. But inside me something stirred. A small discomfort, almost childish. I ignored it. I always did. Because admitting a suspicion would be admitting that something was wrong. And I was not yet ready to face that. I preferred to believe that everything was under control. That I was still the center of the world I myself had created for us. Over time, I began to feel like I was competing with something invisible. It was as if I were fighting for attention with a stage I could not see. The conversations grew more superficial, the silences longer, the looks more distant. And even so, I kept investing. Investing time, money, energy, hope. I did not want to lose what I believed I had built. I did not want to believe that someone can lose themselves even when surrounded by everything. But vanity, when it grows without roots, becomes a bottomless pit. And I still did not perceive the depth of that abyss. It was during this period that I started to notice changes in schedules, routines, and excuses. Meetings that appeared at the last minute, commitments I did not know about, trips that suddenly showed up on the calendar. Everything always came accompanied by well-rehearsed explanations. I listened, I believed, I trusted. Because I still saw in her the woman I had met at that gala. I still saw the bride at the altar, the wife in the first months of enchantment. I clung to those images like someone clings to old photographs while reality transforms. And the more I clung to the past, the more she moved closer to something new. Something I still could not see. But that was already moving freely around her. It was at one of those elite events that he appeared on our radar for the first time. One of those environments where everyone pretends to know each other, but no one truly does. A luxurious rooftop, live music, businessmen toasting, influencers being flattered, flashes everywhere. I was not present that night because of an international meeting. She went alone as she had so many other times. The next day she casually mentioned that she had met some interesting new people. She spoke quickly without details. I gave it no importance. To me it was just another name lost among so many. As the weeks passed, his name began to come up more frequently. A famous influencer, followed by thousands, a regular at the same luxury gym she attended. Always surrounded by beautiful women, imported cars and private parties. She commented on his videos, laughed at some of his stories, said he was funny, smart, successful. I listened without suspicion. After all, in the world I lived in, it was common to cross paths with people like that. What I did not know was that, while I saw him as just another character in that universe, she already saw him as something different. Something that lit in her a dangerous curiosity. She began going to the gym more often. Before, she trained at random times. Now, there were fixed days, set schedules, excessive concern with appearance. Workout outfits became increasingly bold, makeup even for simple activities. I complimented her, thinking it was just normal vanity. In my mind, a beautiful woman taking care of her body was something natural. What was not natural was the different glow in her eyes when she talked about that environment. A glow of expectation. A glow of someone waiting for a reunion. I did not know the lover yet, but he was already part of our routine without my realizing it. He was in the comments on social media, in the gym schedules, in the conversations with her friends. Always indirectly. Never with too much emphasis. Like a discreet presence that slowly infiltrates. I continued immersed in my business, closing deals, traveling, multiplying wealth. While I was building millions in silence, another man was building access to my own home through the mind of my wife. Once, during a dinner, she mentioned that he had landed a multimillion-dollar contract with a famous brand. She spoke with admiration, with far too much enthusiasm for someone who was supposedly just following from afar. I joked, said he seemed like a smart guy. She smiled in a strange way too quickly. Then she changed the subject. At that moment, something inside me shifted slightly. A small discomfort, almost imperceptible. But I still had no proof, no signs clear enough to suspect. So I continued to trust. The changes in her behavior began to intensify. The phone always face down. Notifications muted. Discreet smiles while typing. Long showers after coming back from the gym. Perfumes I did not recognize. I noticed all of this, but I preferred to believe the simple explanations she offered me. I told myself I was becoming paranoid. That too much work was messing with my head. That trust is the foundation of any marriage. And that belief was the wall I myself built against the truth. One day she came home more excited than usual. She spoke quickly, gestured, seemed euphoric. She said she had been invited to a private event, only for selected people. She did not mention names. Only said it would be good for networking. I stayed silent for a few seconds, wondering if I should ask more. But once again I let it go. After all, in my world, private events were routine. What I did not know was that this event would be another step away from me. Over time, she began to dress more and more for the outside world and less for inside the house. In the mansion, simple clothes, distraction, little presence. To go out, flawless productions, hours in front of the mirror, visible anxiety. It was as if there were two versions of her. One that belonged to me by habit. And another that belonged to the world by desire. I watched this transformation in silence, trying to understand whether it was just a phase or something deeper. I still did not want to see what was taking shape. Meanwhile, the lover continued to grow in influence. His image appeared in magazines, his parties became the talk of the town, his name circulated among businessmen and celebrities. He moved with ease in that universe that was also mine. But he operated on the stage of glamour while I worked behind the scenes of power. Two worlds that sometimes cross, and when they cross in the wrong way they leave deep scars. At that moment, I still did not know it, but his presence was no longer just a distant possibility. He was already part of her present. And soon he would stop being just a name in conversations. He would become an event. An event I would not choose to live, but that would be pushed into my own story. And while I still trusted, the machinery of betrayal was already turning at the most dangerous rhythm of all, that of perfect secrecy. The lies began to organize themselves like an invisible company inside my own home. Everything worked with precision. Synchronized schedules, repeated stories, perfectly aligned excuses. Trips with friends, networking dinners, last-minute commitments that always appeared when I was out of the country. I, immersed in meetings with investors, auditing numbers that moved in the millions, had no time to doubt everything. I trusted because I wanted to trust. I trusted because believing required less effort than questioning. Meanwhile, she learned to lie with the same natural ease with which she wore jewelry. With no visible guilt. With no tremor in her voice. Their meetings took place in the same places that once symbolized only luxury and rest to me. 5-star hotels, exclusive spas, glass rooftops overlooking the entire city. Places where no one asks for your name, where only the card and appearances matter. She said she was in meetings, but she was in beds I had never known. While I signed contracts that changed the destinies of companies, she signed her own emotional sentence with forbidden kisses. And I, on the other side of the world, believed that everything was under control. The irony was far too cruel for me to notice at the time. Every detail of the routine was adjusted to sustain them. The phone never far from her body. Showers immediately upon arriving. Clothes always justified by social commitments. New perfumes explained as gifts from friends. I accepted everything. Not only out of naivety but because I was tired. Tired of traveling, of negotiating, of sustaining an entire empire alone. I wanted that, at least inside my home, I could feel safe. And that need for safety was used against me without my realizing it. There were nights when I called out of longing and she took a long time to answer. When she did answer, she spoke softly, said she was in a noisy environment, that she would call me back later. And I waited. I always waited. I told myself that love is also patience. Little did I know that my patience was being used to give time for another story to move behind the scenes. And while I waited alone in luxury hotel rooms, she shared laughter with someone who had never built anything I built, but wanted to enjoy everything. Money also became part of the disguise. Transfers for unexpected expenses, purchases outside her usual pattern, travel costs that did not pass through me. I did not monitor it. I always gave her total financial freedom. I thought that showed trust. In truth, it was financing my own pain without my knowing it. Every cent used for the comfort of betrayal came from companies I built brick by brick. And the most painful irony is that I worked twice as hard to sustain a marriage that no longer existed. The nights out with friends began to repeat far too often. Fridays, Saturdays, sometimes even during the week. I came home exhausted and the house was empty. The security team knew only the departure times, never the exact destinations. She asked that the car not be tracked for personal safety. Everything seemed too careful, too planned. And still I ignored the signs. Because signs require courage to be read. And I did not yet have that courage. There was one specific night when she arrived home at dawn. The watch on my wrist marked almost 3 a.m. She tried to walk in quietly but I woke up. Her eyes showed a fright that she tried to hide too quickly. She said the event had run late, that there had been an unexpected after-party. I listened in silence. She came closer, tried to kiss me. I smelled a perfume different from hers. A masculine scent mixed with hers. My mind froze for a few seconds. My body wanted to ask questions, but my reason chose to swallow the discomfort. I turned to the side and pretended to sleep. It was there that part of me began to break without making a sound. Little by little, I stopped being a priority. My calls came later, my messages were answered when she had time, my invitations were postponed. Everything that had once been spontaneous became scheduled. And love, when it needs a schedule to exist, is already in a terminal stage. I felt that, but I was afraid to name it. Naming things makes them real. And I still did not want that to be real. I still wanted to believe it was all just the result of stress, of a hectic routine, of excessive exposure. Meanwhile, she began to take even more care of her own image. Strict gym routines, aesthetic procedures, new clothes almost every week. I watched her get ready to go out as if she were about to step onto a stage. And maybe she was. A stage where I was no longer the protagonist. A stage where another man had the place that once was mine. But at that stage I was still just the invisible sponsor of the spectacle. The man who sustained the environment while being slowly written out of the script. The betrayal did not happen in a single day. It was built in small bricks of lies, broken routines, absent affection, and postponed truths. When everything looked normal on the outside, on the inside there was already nothing left. And I only did not see it because I still loved a version of her that no longer existed. While I managed millions, she managed clandestine meetings with a coldness I had never associated with the face that once told me she loved me at the altar. And it was this way, in the silence of the nights and the noise of secrets, that the truth began to move in my direction. The discovery did not come like thunder, it came like a thin blade. It did not cut all at once. It slid in slowly, tearing me apart from the inside. It all began with something too small to justify a scandal but too big to be ignored. A forgotten receipt in the car pocket, from a 5-star hotel on a day when she said she was in another city. I held that piece of paper for several minutes before reacting. My brain searched for logical explanations, comforting alternatives, anything that was not the truth. But the truth has its own weight. And that paper weighed tons in my hand. In the days that followed, I began to observe in silence. I did not confront her, I did not question her, I did not change my behavior. I only observed. The phone always hidden, the irregular schedules, the smiles out of context. Every small detail I once ignored now took on a cruel sharpness. I became a stranger inside my own home, watching the routine of the woman I thought I knew. And the more I saw, the less I recognized. Love begins to die when admiration turns into suspicion. And at that moment, something inside me was slowly dying. I installed security cameras in areas that previously had no coverage. Nothing obvious, nothing that drew attention. Everything discreet, technical, predictable, like a controlled risk investment. I asked my security team to inform me about certain specific outings. I did not explain why. They obeyed. In my world, loyalty is also bought with well-drafted contracts. Each new piece of information was like another piece of a macabre puzzle falling into place. And the image forming was no longer that of the woman I had married. The delayed calls began to make sense. The excuses started to repeat mechanically. The trips always appeared on dates that were far too convenient. And then came the confirmation I feared. One night when I was supposed to be out of town, but returned early without warning. Her car was not in the garage. I asked security for the tracking at that exact moment. The destination pointed to an upscale neighborhood, near luxury hotels. My chest went heavy. My mind froze. But I went. I entered one of those hotels where no one looks twice at attractive faces and unlimited credit cards. I rode the mirrored elevator feeling my own face distort with anxiety. An employee confirmed the reservation in her name after seeing my last name. The hallway felt endless. Each step was a year of marriage passing through my head. When I stopped in front of the room door, I still hesitated for a few seconds. Maybe hoping everything was a lie. That this was the wrong scene. But the doorknob turned easily. What I saw cannot be described in detail because of the shame I still carry. Her body intertwined with another man's. The perfume, the discarded clothes, the intimacy that had once been mine now exposed without any restraint. The lover was exactly who I had suspected. The elite influencer, smiling as if he believed the world was his private playground. For a second no one moved. The silence screamed. And in that silence, something inside me finally broke. She tried to explain. Tried to touch me. Tried to say words I could no longer hear. The lover dressed in a hurry without any dignity. I did not shout. I did not advance. I did not make a scene. I simply looked. Looked like someone confirming a terminal diagnosis. Something inside me shut down at that moment. My heart kept beating, but it no longer commanded anything. What took over was a coldness I had never felt before. The coldness of someone who understands he has just lost everything, and at the same time has just gained clarity. I left that room in silence. I said nothing. I made no threats. I made no promises. I simply walked down the hallway with the feeling that the ground had shifted beneath my feet. In the elevator, my reflection looked like another man. An older man, heavier, emptier. When the doors closed, one single sentence echoed inside my head over and over. It is over. But the end of something is also the beginning of something else. I just did not yet know what. She returned home at dawn. She tried to explain, cried, begged. I listened in silence. Every word she spoke now sounded far too false to reach anything inside me. When she finished, I only said that I needed time. A time that, in practice, had already begun the moment I saw that door open. She slept in the house that night. I slept in the office. I did not truly sleep. I only stared at the city through the glass windows, trying to understand how everything collapsed without making a sound. The next morning, I left early for the company as if nothing had happened. She was still asleep. The world kept turning, people kept going to work, the markets kept opening. But for me, something had stopped in time inside that hotel room. And as I returned to the empire that was still intact, a silent decision began to form inside me. A decision that would not be made in the heat of pain, but in the ice of lucidity. Because some turning points are not born from hatred. They are born from exhaustion. And I was profoundly tired. In the days that followed, silence took over the mansion like a thick fog. There were no more arguments, no more discussions, no more theatrical tears. Only distance. I woke up early, went to the company, and came back late, avoiding any conversation that was not strictly necessary. She tried to start conversations, but I no longer had emotional space for anything beyond the essential. Love had been replaced by a kind of icy indifference. And indifference, I discovered, hurts more than hatred. Because there is not even enough energy left to hurt, only to move on. She was the one who made the decision first, at least officially. One afternoon she appeared with a firm voice and swollen eyes, saying she needed to live something new, that our relationship had cooled, that we were in different phases. She spoke as if I had seen nothing, as if the betrayal were an irrelevant detail in the script she was trying to write herself. I listened to everything with a calm that unsettled her. When she finished, I simply agreed. I said she was right. That we were, indeed, people in different worlds now. That disarmed her. because she expected confrontation, visible pain, maybe even an implosion. But she found only acceptance. The divorce was handled with the same cold precision with which I handle corporate acquisitions. Lawyers, contracts, clauses, division of assets, deadlines. I made sure she had enough comfort so she could not say she left empty-handed. Part of the mansion, some investments, cars, jewelry. Nothing that threatened my empire, but enough for her to continue living at a high standard. She left believing she had won. She left with her head held high, like someone abandoning something big to live something even bigger. I watched her cross the mansion gates for the last time with elegant suitcases and a restrained smile. In that moment I felt pain, yes, but I also felt a strange relief. As if an old lie had finally left my territory. A few days later, social media began to confirm what I already knew. She appeared in photos beside him, on trips, at parties, in expensive restaurants. The lover was no longer a secret, he was a trophy on display. She smiled as if she had won a rare prize. And for her, perhaps she truly had. The virtual world applauded her. Comments praised her courage, her freedom, her new phase. Few people knew that this freedom was sustained by the remains of a marriage still warm in its ashes. I watched everything with an almost clinical detachment. Each photo was like a page being turned too quickly, without fully erasing the previous one. For a while she lived it as if she were at her peak. Frequent trips, new clothes, exclusive events, appearances in digital magazines beside her lover. The influencer introduced her even further into the world of public ostentation. Now beyond being rich she was displayed. Beyond being desired, she was validated by likes. I knew that this type of validation is a fast addiction. The more you receive, the more you need. And I also knew that addictions like that require constant maintenance. Maintenance that is expensive, emotionally and financially. While she launched herself into this new storyline, I withdrew as never before. I reduced public appearances, declined events, and focused only on what had always been my true territory, silent work. She believed I had been defeated. That I was too wounded to react. Perhaps she even believed I was broken. And in a way I was. But not in the way she imagined. I was being dismantled to be rebuilt. And those who go through this process in silence usually return in a way that frightens. There came a moment when she tried to keep in touch, subtly. Short, cold messages, almost procedural, about documents, divorce details, some forgotten item. I replied only what was necessary. Without emotion. Without irony. Without opening space. That bothered her more than any argument would have. Because she no longer had access to what she once had completely. And for someone used to indirect emotional control, losing that access is almost a preemptive humiliation. In the middle of that scenario, she seemed to believe her new life was solid. That she was now beside someone who gave her emotion, exposure, and status. That she had traded silent stability for noisy intensity. I saw it like someone watching a highly volatile investment being made without any risk analysis. I knew that such a fast rise could hide an even faster fall. But it was no longer my role to warn her. I was no longer responsible for her. And that liberation, although painful, brought a kind of unprecedented lightness into my life. As the months passed, I began to notice small cracks in that perfect ostentation. Fewer trips, fewer appearances, fewer contracts around them. The shine was still there, but it no longer seemed constant. I observed from a distance, without seeking, without investigating. Fate seemed to be working with an unsettling precision. And while she still believed she was living the best phase of her life, something behind the scenes was already moving at a dangerous pace. A pace that rarely forgives those who build castles on unstable promises. That was when I decided it was time to turn my gaze completely back to myself. To the man I had been before the marriage. To the boy who built millions starting from nothing. To the one who did not depend on anyone to move forward. My pain would not turn into scandal, nor into cheap revenge. It would turn into fuel. And while she celebrated the present that seemed perfect, I prepared myself, in absolute silence, for a future no one saw coming. A future that would completely alter the balance of this story. While her name circulated at parties and in digital headlines, mine returned to circulate behind the scenes of real money. I plunged into work like someone entering a silent war. Meeting after meeting, strategic acquisitions, bold mergers, high-risk investments that only someone very confident would dare to sign. Where there had once been pain, there was now absolute focus. I was not seeking public revenge. I was seeking expansion. Every contract closed was a step away from the wounded man I had been. And the more I grew, the more I understood that my best answer had always been success. One of the biggest moves of my career happened during this period. I sold one of my companies for a value that drastically changed my net worth. The entire market reacted. My competitors were in shock. Analysts wondered how someone so young could make such bold moves with such precision. That sale placed me on another financial level. I stopped being just a respected millionaire and became someone truly feared on the corporate chessboard. And the most ironic part was that all of this was happening while she believed I was defeated. The contrast was brutal. With the capital from that sale, I entered new sectors. Technology, luxury real estate, international investments. I bought stakes in companies abroad, opened offices in strategic locations, expanded my presence in markets where I had once been only an occasional visitor. My name began to circulate in rooms I had previously only seen on television. Older CEOs watched me closely. Some with admiration, others with apprehension. I was no longer a promise. I was reality. A reality growing too fast to be ignored. The media sought me out again, but with a different tone. Now I was no longer just the young prodigy, but the businessman who had executed one of the most impressive turnarounds of the year. Business magazines featured my face alongside massive numbers. Interviews followed. International invitations as well. I returned to the spotlight, but not with trivial exposure. I appeared associated with power, strategy, and vision. The kind of visibility that builds solid reputation, not just fleeting likes. And with every new headline, I knew that somewhere she was seeing it too. My habits changed. Longer trips, more complex meetings, even more exclusive environments. Private jets went from being an exception to becoming routine. 6-star hotels became workplaces. I closed deals while looking out over oceans, deserts, entire metropolises. Money multiplied at an increasing speed. And for the first time in a long while, I slept with the feeling that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not out of revenge, but out of alignment with myself. At the same time, I began to rebuild my personal world. Without haste. Without neediness. Only with clarity. I distanced myself from people who approached only out of interest. I strengthened old friendships, reconnected with my essence. I returned to training, to caring for my body, my mind, my routine. The pain transformed into a silent scar. The betrayal stopped being an open wound and became a milestone. A turning point. I did not become cold. I became selective. Sometime later, I was invited to a massive business event. One of those ceremonies where only top-tier investors enter, owners of conglomerates, leaders of entire markets. I arrived with my team with a new imported car, a new watch on my wrist, a new posture toward the world. I walked with the confidence of someone who now controls not only companies, but also his own narrative. And that night, I would draw more attention than any influencer ever could. It was at that event that I saw, for the first time since the divorce, people whispering around me. Not because of scandal, but because of respect. Out of curiosity. Out of genuine interest in high-level connection. My name was no longer associated with a marital drama. It was associated with growth, power, and international expansion. And that completely changes a man's position in the social game. The same game that once wounded me now observed me with reverence. While I rose consistently, I began to notice discreet news about her and the lover. Fewer advertising contracts, fewer invitations, fewer interested brands. The popularity that had seemed endless began to show signs of fragility. Digital charm is fast to rise, but just as fast to tire the audience. And when the audience grows tired, it simply turns away. I watched it all without celebrating. Only understanding that reality always charges the bills that fantasy ignores. I also began to appear in international magazines she used to follow. On financial portals she once shared. In rankings of young rising billionaires. My face now crossed oceans. My name crossed championships of figures. And I knew that, even trying, it would be impossible for her not to see. It was as if fate insisted on crossing our paths again in the public eye. Only now, in completely reversed positions. At that moment, I already understood something with absolute clarity. My turnaround was not only financial. It was symbolic. I had proven to myself that nothing she did was capable of destroying me. On the contrary, it pushed me toward a version of myself I had not yet known. A version more focused, more powerful, more reserved. And while I consolidated this new silent empire, I felt that the next chapter of this story was approaching. A reunion that would not be sought by me, but that would knock on my door when she had lost everything she thought she had gained. The first sign that her castle was crumbling came quietly, almost timidly. A message sent at an odd hour, too brief for someone who had always been so expansive. She asked how I was, mentioned old memories as if trying to reopen a door she herself had slammed shut. I read it without replying. Not out of planned contempt, but because the urgency I once felt no longer existed within me. That message, which months earlier might have shaken me, now felt like a distant echo of something that no longer reached me. Silence, in that moment, became my first definitive answer. Not long after, I learned that her lover had lost important contracts. Brands cut partnerships, sponsors disappeared, his image began to wear down. The digital shine faded little by little, like party lights at dawn. And when money starts to disappear, fantasy usually collapses quickly. She, who had once appeared in constant travels, began to vanish from social media. The photos decreased, the stories became rare, the smiles repetitive, almost forced. I did not seek out this information. It simply reached me, carried by a world that now watched me from a different angle. The final fall came when he left her. Without spectacle, without speeches, without broken public promises. He simply went away just as he had arrived. When access to luxury begins to fail, interest evaporates. She was left alone on the stage she believed to be permanent. Money began to shrink, bills began to weigh heavy, status began to disappear. Friends from the golden phase vanished at the same pace. And it was in that emptiness that my name returned to her life. This time without pride, without vanity, without pretense. Only as a last resort. She tried to find me at a business event where my presence had been confirmed. She stayed at a distance for a while, watching, trying to decide whether she had the courage to approach. I saw her before she saw me. Time had not been kind to her in the same way it had been to me. It was not just appearance. It was energy. It was posture. It was the weight of choices reflected in her gestures. When our eyes met, she lowered hers. The contrast between the man I had become and everything she had lost was too stark to be ignored. A few days later, she obtained my contact through an old lawyer. She asked only to talk. Said she needed to see me. That it was important. I agreed, not out of hope but for closure. We met at a discreet cafe far from the spotlight. When she arrived, she wore elegance but without the former glow. In her eyes there was more fear than pride, more need than desire. She looked at me as if seeing a harbor in the middle of the storm she herself had created. She spoke at length. She spoke of regret, of wrong choices, of mistakes, of loneliness, of illusion. She said she had confused emotion with happiness, that she had lost everything that truly mattered. She said she watched me from afar, that she saw my growth, that she felt small before everything I had achieved. She cried. She begged. She asked for a chance to start over, as if time were a button that could be pressed to erase everything. I listened in silence. The same silence she had once ignored when I was still inside the marriage. When she finished, I took a deep breath. There was no anger in me. There was no desire to humiliate her, nor to return the pain with the same intensity. There was only clarity. I said that all of it was part of the choices she had made. That I too had gone through pain, loneliness, confusion. But unlike her, I had used it to grow, not to run away. I said that I did not hate her. But I also said that I no longer wanted her in my life. Not as a wife. Not even as a frequent memory. Only as part of a closed past. She tried to come closer, to touch my hand, to say that she still loved me. I gently pulled away. Not out of coldness but out of respect for myself. I explained that the love that had once existed had not survived betrayal. That trust, when it dies, does not return in another form. That I could never again share my life with someone who had been capable of replacing me while I was building everything for the two of us. I spoke calmly. Without raising my voice. Without making a scene. For her, that was more painful than any scream. She left that cafe smaller than she had entered. Not in size but in presence. I remained seated for a few minutes, watching people pass by, each with their own invisible story. For the first time I felt that the cycle had truly been closed. Not with revenge, not with scandal, not with public exposure. But with a serene and definitive refusal. A refusal that showed how far I already was from the man who would have begged not to be abandoned. After that meeting, I never saw her again. Through third parties, I learned that she tried to rebuild her life, that she faced financial difficulties, that she lost much of the standard she once had. I learned that she carried regret, that she repeated my name in conversations like someone trying to go back in time without a machine. I heard all of this as one listens to the story of someone who no longer belongs to their own narrative. Because at that point in my life, I had already understood something essential. Some doors, when they close to protect the future, not to punish the past. And that was how I moved on. Not with hatred, not with nostalgia, but with the certainty that my greatest victory was not becoming richer, more respected, or more powerful. My greatest victory was learning to choose myself after having been left behind. And as I continued to move forward, She remained trapped exactly in the moment she decided to leave. A moment that could never be rewritten. A period she tried to turn into a comma. Too late. Funny how life doesn't need to shout to bring justice. Sometimes it simply waits. It waits for the wrong choice, the misstep, the moment when a person believes they have won, and then it collects everything all at once. I didn't need revenge, I didn't need to expose, I didn't need to destroy. I simply kept growing while she chose to fall. And today, when I remember everything, I don't feel hatred. I feel understanding. Understanding that not everyone can the weight of an empire. Not everyone knows how to handle stability when they confuse love with emotion. She thought she was leaving me behind, but in truth she was leaving her own story behind. She traded security for illusion, built pride on fragile promises, and discovered too late that not every door that opens leads to a safe place. Some only lead you closer to the abyss. And when you realize it, there are no hands left to pull you back. Today I move forward, stronger, more lucid, more reserved. Not because I defeated someone, but because I learned from myself. I learned that those who abandon you during the process never deserve to meet you at the final result. And that not every request for forgiveness is born from love. Sometimes it is born only from the desperation of someone who has lost everything. Now I want to ask you an honest question. Would you forgive a betrayal after reaching the top? Would you give a second chance to someone who traded you away while you were still building everything? Write in the comments what you would do in my place. I really want to read your opinion. And if you like stories of luxury, betrayal, epic turnarounds, and unexpected karma, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because the next story might be even more intense than this one.